One Punch Man just dropped so many bombshells in this chapter. Chapter 206 of One Punch Man is here, and it is absolutely insane. We finally get the return of the long-awaited fight between Blast and Empty Void, and we also get the reveal of Blast's son, which is absolutely insane. Being a webcomic reader myself, I already knew that these events were coming, but just seeing it drawn by Murata in the manga, it was still just as shocking as it was when I first read it. It was beautiful. Wonderful chapter. Don't want to waste too much time gushing over it though. Let's get right into it. So this issue's chapter cover features the two characters that were introduced at the end of the previous chapter, which is of course Aramin and Destro. Don't want to spend too much time in this video talking about them. I covered them in my last chapter review pretty well, so if you guys want to know about the history with them and their potential relevance to the story going forward, go ahead and watch that video. But for now, they were just introduced as kind of like outside hired bodyguards for the Neo heroes. So they're presumably pretty strong, and we're going to find out more about them at the beginning of this chapter as well. Because the chapter starts out with Aramin and Destro walking inside the room as they were at the end of the previous chapter, and they pretty much tell Mars, Leo, and Solitude, come with us to the break room and cool off a bit because we can't have you guys disrupting this meeting. So they're walking down this hallway, and Mars, Leo, being the more hot-headed of the two, starts going off about, how he's pissed off that he's not a Neo leader, and that we have, these bodyguards taking us away, and obviously he thinks he can beat them up, but as we're about to see there, that's probably not the case. And Solitude, on the other hand, is just kind of like, he's very quiet, but he also seems like he's panicking internally, and this is exactly why, because he's analyzing them like he analyzed Webigaza when she had, I think it was 75% cyber modifications. Solitude sees that Airman and Destro have 94 and 95% cybernetic modifications, which is insane. Like, that's like, I don't even know if Genos is that much of a cyborg. I know his brain's organic, but maybe he's pretty close to that. Considering, how stressful it is on the body, as Solitude pointed out in the previous chapter, they obviously have some very strong resolve and are very powerful as well. So, Solitude decides we better not cross these two, and they kind of just move on down the hallway. We then cut back to all the Neo leaders in the room, and we see that Webigaza stumbles over and seems to be a little bit shaken up. Child Emperor or Wild Emperor, whatever, comes to her aid, and she just says it's a small headache, but, you can assume it's likely due to the side effects of all these different modifications she had done, because not only is she part cyborg, but apparently she also took, like, medications or supplements or had some kind of brain augmentation done to, give her Esper powers to a certain extent. So she's had a lot of work done on her, and, she's obviously facing the side effects of that right now. But she also points out something very interesting here. And the next slide, after she points this out, it like gave me a jump scare. I'm not gonna lie. It definitely did. She says, the main server here and my brain got connected in the modification surgery. Lately, I've had the sensation like someone is reaching in and probing around. And then, obviously Child Emperor is the one doing this because he's going to the Neo heroes undercover. But then he has this like shocking look on his face, and we see why, because on the next page, she's just like dead staring into Child Emperor's eyes. And man, this is such a creepy drawing. Murata did an amazing job with this. Like, this is like straight out of like a horror manga almost. And I don't know, it blew me away. I was not expecting it to be this detailed and this like eerie, you know what I mean? And it definitely shows you why Child Emperor is freaking out in that moment. But of course, Suiryu kind of acting as the comic relief and low-key kind of saving Child Emperor's ass here. He picks up Webigaza and says, I gotta take you to the infirmary right now. But of course, this being his first time in the Neo Heroes headquarters, he has no clue where the infirmary is. And Webigaza makes him put her down and explains that this is her normal body temperature. So of course, this is also a side effect from being mostly cyborg, because there's a bunch of stuff kind of going on in her body, a bunch of wheels turning. So she's probably gonna, it's almost like a car, like when a car is running, it's pretty hot on the, the engine side and stuff. So that's kind of what's going on with Webigaza. And I think what's pretty funny as well is that Infelsinave is kind of just seeing this all happening. And he's like, man, what a bunch of weirdos. Like, the cult leader of like 3 million people is calling them weirdos, which is, I thought it was pretty ironic. But then we move on with the introductions because Metalbat hasn't gotten his introduction yet. And he's kind of introduced as the strongest pacifist or the strongest brawler pacifist. And McCoy explains that he chose the Neo Heroes over the Hero Association because he wanted to become a hero that his little sister could be proud of. But of course, that's all a bunch of bull. He's actually joining because he's kind of joining in on the undercover effort with Child Emperor. This is where Ryuman kind of interjects again, and it seems like we're definitely building this like tension or this dynamic between Ryuman and Metal Bat, which I'm pretty excited to see how it turns out because, you know, Metal Bat's an awesome character. I love his kind of like brazen, brash attitude, of course, his kind of like delinquent style that he has going on. And Ryuman, I always thought was a pretty interesting character as well because he's not very clearly like physically strong, at least not, on the surface. So I'm very curious to see how he sizes up to Metal Bat and what he kind of uses as his weapons or his abilities or whatever, But for now, we don't really get any of that. But Ryuman interjects and he says, in other words, he's an idiot. And Metal Bat just smiles and says, you ain't wrong. And he's thinking to himself that, being a bit of an idiot is probably better suited for his like undercover effort than being subtle at work because, he doesn't want to be suspected and no one suspects an idiot. That's kind of his whole mentality behind it. And he has this moment with Ryuman immediately after this that I think was pretty cool, actually. He starts walking towards him and says, I'll take that as a compliment, senpai. And he gets all up in his face and he says, seems like I'll get along with you. And obviously Ryuman's looking at him like, obviously knowing that that's not what he means. And I thought that was just a pretty cool panel. But McCoy starts moving on and he gets to the most important part of this chapter, which is introducing like the head of the Neo leaders, like the main Neo leader. And McCoy starts explaining. And lastly, the one sitting in the back, he is the very person who laid the foundation for the Neo heroes. Surely he will become the symbol of a new era of heroes. He's the leader standing at the top of our organization, and he introduces himself as Blue. And the little speech he gives us a pretty good idea of what kind of person he is. He kind of came off to me as almost like in a My Mask type of person where they put justice above all else. They're pretty rigid with that, like justice is the important thing for them, So he goes on to say, the Neo heroes were established with the purpose of showing real heroes to the world. But it's not that easy. Under the banner of justice, we can't restore peace if we don't fully commit to it. Let's do it together. Join forces with me, all of you. And one of the other Neo leaders that was introduced earlier, points out that he was pretty surprised that a 16-year-old kid was going to be their leader or like the head of the organization pretty much. And that's kind of like the author's way of telling us his age without directly saying it. So now we know that he's 16 years old. But then Zayditz, the rich guy, he says he is special after all. And we find out why he is this special because he is in fact Blast's son. And he even has like the same eyes as Blast. And just this image of him, it's so awesome. It got me so excited for what's to come in the manga because I know like Blue is officially here. He's officially part of the story. And he's going to play a pretty big role in the story going forward. And if that wasn't awesome enough, these last 2 pages of the chapter got me so freaking excited because we then cut to Blast's fist and Empty Void's sword. And on the final panel of the chapter, we get Blast decking Empty Void right in the face, and it is so incredibly drawn. If you guys have been following the redraws in this arc, actually this was the very final panel before the redraw started. So this is essentially a redesign of the initial panel, and you can tell that a lot more detail, a lot more time went into this one because it just looks so much better. The perspective of it, the shading, the expressions, it looks amazing. I love it. I definitely want to know what you guys think about this final panel and this chapter as a whole, though. This got me so hyped for the future chapters. A lot of you guys that watch my videos know that these last couple chapters I've been not so happy with, just kind of the structuring of how this arc has been going, going to the Neo leaders and cutting away from this massive fight. But we're finally getting back to it, which is very exciting. I am very glad that we got all that Neo leaders information stuff out of the way. Again, like I said, ideally I would have liked to have had it after this. It would have flowed better in my opinion, but the way that whole sequence ended with Blue being revealed as Blast's son, I think is actually a pretty good segue into the fight. So, you know what, this is pretty awesome. I have no complaints. I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comments below though. Let me know what you thought about the chapter, what you think about Blue's design, what you're kind of expecting for the upcoming battle between Blast and Empty Void. I want to know all those thoughts, but that is it for this video though. Have an absolutely wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.